At the Seoul headquarters of Hansung Group, the annual gala is in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and 500 of the country's most powerful people. When a black woman in a cleaner's uniform accidentally steps into the ballroom, CEO Han Myung-jun sees an opportunity to entertain his guests. He calls her out by name, mocks her station, and orders security to remove her. What he does not know is that the woman he just humiliated is the daughter of the largest foreign investor in this company. And in just a few hours, she will walk back in wearing a gown that costs more than his entire severance package, holding the future of his deal in her perfectly manicured hands. Her name is Amara Keita, and she is not a cleaner. She is the daughter of the man who controls the largest sovereign investment fund on the African continent, the very fund Han Myung-jun needs to close a merger that will save Hansung Group from a hostile takeover. Amara took the job undercover 6 weeks ago to understand the company she might one day inherit a seat on the board of. Tonight, when Han humiliated her in front of the entire Seoul elite, he did not expose a lowly worker. He detonated a bomb under a deal worth $4.8 billion. And now, Amara is about to walk back through those doors, not to clean them, but to decide whether Han Myung-jun still has a company by sunrise. The elevator climbs 47 floors in silence. Amara Keita watches the numbers tick upward, her reflection ghosted in polished brass. The woman in this reflection wears an emerald silk gown, hand-stitched by an atelier in Milan, gold threading at the neckline, hair in loose waves falling past bare shoulders. 6 hours ago, this same woman wore a grey polyester uniform with her name misspelled on a plastic badge. 6 hours ago, Han Myung-jun called her an embarrassment to the building. He told her to leave before she lowered the property value. He said this to a room of 500 people who laughed. None of them knew she had a keycard in her pocket that could freeze every corporate account Hansung Group owns. But to understand how the daughter of the richest man in West Africa ended up on her knees, scrubbing a ballroom floor, you have to go back 47 days. Hansung Group was dying, not slowly, not quietly, but with the kind of desperate flailing that makes quarterly reports read like obituaries. The company had overextended into semiconductor fabrication just before a global chip glut collapsed margins. A rival conglomerate, Jinxing Holdings out of Shanghai, had been quietly buying up distressed debt for 9 months. They now controlled 34% of Hansung's voting shares. If that number reached 51 by the end of the fiscal quarter, Jinxing would swallow the company whole. Every division, every patent, every real estate holding. Han Myung-jun would lose the empire his grandfather built from a textile stand. The only exit was a massive capital injection and a strategic merger with a biotech firm developing breakthrough neural interface technology. The price tag, $4.8 billion. The only entity on Earth that could move that kind of money without strings attached was the Keita Sovereign Fund, managed by Adebio Keita from his headquarters in Lagos. Adebio had never invested a single naira in Korea. He was famously cautious, famously demanding of the people who took his money. He did not invest in companies, he invested in character, and he sent his daughter to find out if Han Myung-jun had any. Amara Keita was 28 years old. She held an MBA from Oxford and a childhood spent in the back rooms of her father's negotiations, watching him dismantle ministers and CEOs with the same patient smile. She had spent 5 years restructuring failing companies across 3 continents. She spoke 4 languages fluently and could read a balance sheet faster than most people read a menu. But she had never seen a Korean keyboard from the inside. So when her father told her he was considering the Hansung deal, she proposed something unconventional. Don't send a team of analysts in suits. Send her, not as a cater, as a cleaner. She wanted to see the company at its floor level, where people did not perform for investors. She wanted to know if Han Myung-jun was the man in the polished investor decks or something else entirely. Her father laughed for 3 seconds, then stopped when he realized she was serious. Then he agreed, because that was the kind of trust they had built during 28 years of her being exactly the daughter he had raised. The placement was arranged through a staffing agency that did not ask questions. Amara's credentials were stripped to the barest fiction. A French passport with a new surname, a work history too thin to investigate, a reference letter from a hotel in Marseille that her father's people had made real down to the shift manager's phone number. She arrived in Seoul on a Tuesday, and by Thursday she was pushing a grey cart down the marble corridors of Hansung Tower, a perfectly unremarkable woman with a mop and a list of baseboards to polish. The first week, she was invisible. This was the point. She watched department heads scream at their assistants. She overheard a senior vice president take a bribe over speakerphone with his office door open. She noted every fire exit, every unsecured server room, every executive who arrived late and left early. None of it surprised her, but Han Myung-jun did. She first saw him on her third day. He was in the elevator, alone, staring at the floor numbers with the hollow concentration of a man who had not slept in 3 days. He did not notice her. The next week, she watched him fire a logistics director in the middle of an open-plan office, not cruelly exactly, but with the surgical coldness of someone removing a faulty part. The man wept. Han did not blink. Amara made a note in the encrypted file she kept on a phone hidden in her cart. She was gathering a portrait of a man who ran his company like a war general and treated human beings as resources to be optimized or discarded. But then came the afternoon in the parking garage. She was on a smoke break she did not need just to observe the shift change. Han emerged from a private elevator with 2 men she did not recognize. He was speaking Korean, but her ear had already sharpened to catch the edges. The men were from Jinxing. They were offering him a buyout, a generous one, a golden parachute that would make him a billionaire twice over and spare his company the humiliating dismantling. Han listened without interrupting. Then he said something very quiet that Amara had to replay from memory 3 times before she was certain she had heard it correctly. "I will burn this company to the foundation before I let you touch a single patent that my employees spent their lives building." The men left. Han stood alone in the concrete dark, one hand pressed flat against a pillar, breathing like a boxer after a round. He was not the man she had been cataloging. He was something more complex. And for one dangerous moment, Amara felt something that was not professional detachment. She buried it and walked back to her cart. The third week, the pressure inside Hansung became visible. Payroll was delayed by 2 days. 3 senior engineers resigned to join the Jinxing camp. The board began to fracture, with one faction openly demanding Han step aside for a restructuring specialist with ties to Shanghai. Amara watched Han navigate this with a quiet fury that manifested only in the sharpening of his attention. He stopped sleeping in his penthouse upstairs. He slept on a couch in his office. She knew because she cleaned it at 2 in the morning and once found him still awake, staring at spreadsheets, a cold cup of coffee abandoned at his elbow. He looked up, saw her, and for one strange second his guard was completely down. He said, "Do you ever wonder why you work so hard for something that might not exist in a month?" She did not answer with words. She simply refilled his coffee and left. The next morning, he left a small note on the cart. "Thank you." It was the first time anyone in this building had thanked her for anything. It would also be the last. The gala was planned as a show of strength. Invitations went out to every shareholder, every minister, every potential partner who might tip the balance. Han needed the cater fund to attend. He needed a Debio's representative to see Hansung not as a sinking ship, but as a fortress worth defending. Amara knew this because she had been feeding her father updates that were carefully ambiguous. She had not yet given her final recommendation. She was still watching. But the gala would force the clock to 0. On the day of the event, she arrived early. She spent 10 hours polishing brass, arranging flowers, checking table settings. At 7 p.m., she should have been gone. The agency had scheduled her shift to end before the first guest arrived, but a supervisor demanded she stay to handle a last-minute spill in the service corridor. So she was still there, in her gray uniform, when the ballroom doors opened and the elite of Seoul began to drift in like sharks scenting blood. She was behind a potted palm, trying to slip toward the service exit, when Han Myung-jun's voice cut through the room. "Stop, you, the cleaner." Every head turned. He had been drinking. She could see it in the looseness of his posture, the brightness in his eyes that was not triumph but exhaustion masked as confidence. He saw her, and in that moment he saw everything he was terrified of losing, and every person who had ever doubted him, and every shareholder who wanted him gone. And he decided to prove his power in the cheapest way available. He called her to the center of the ballroom. He asked her name, though he already knew it. He asked where she was from, though he had read her false file. He asked if she had ever seen so much money in one room. He was performing. The crowd laughed. His board members laughed. His rivals laughed. Amara stood still, hands at her sides, face unreadable. For 60 seconds, Han Myungjun tore strips off a stranger to feel like a king again. And then he dismissed her with a wave, the way you dismiss a servant who has overstayed. 3 hours later, Amara Keita steps out of the elevator on the 47th floor. The ballroom music spills through the doors ahead, muffled, unaware. Security moves to block her, then freezes when they see who is flanking her. Not cleaners, not staff. 4 operators from her father's personal detail, and behind them, Adebio Keita himself, who has flown 8,000 miles in the past 3 hours because when someone makes his daughter stand in the center of a room and invites the world to laugh, he attends the next meeting personally. Amara places one hand on the ballroom door. She can hear Han's voice inside, toasting the future of Hansung Group. She pushes the door open. The first person to see her is a board member's wife, who chokes on her champagne. Then the music falters. Then Han Myungjun turns, and the smile freezes on his face with the full, slow-motion horror of a man watching $4.8 billion walk back into the room wearing the face of the woman he just destroyed. But Amara has not come back for an apology. She has come back to deliver a question that will determine whether Han Myungjun still has a company by the time the sun rises over Seoul. The ballroom does not go silent all at once. The silence moves through it like a wave, starting at the door and crashing over the tables nearest the entrance. A board member's wife chokes on champagne. Her husband turns, sees the woman in the emerald gown, and drops his glass. It shatters on marble. Then the string quartet falters, one violin at a time. By the time Han Myungjun turns, the room is a frozen photograph of expensive clothing and suspended breath. And the only sound is the click of Amara Keita's heels on the floor he ordered her to leave 3 hours ago. She stops in the center of the ballroom, the exact spot where he made her stand while 500 people laughed. She is not holding a mop now, she is holding something far more dangerous. The absolute stillness of a woman who does not need to speak first because time itself is on her side. Han's mouth opens, it closes. The champagne glass in his hand tilts, drips, and he does not notice. His brain is running a collision course between the image of the cleaner he dismissed and the woman standing before him in a dress that costs more than the annual salary of every senior vice president in his company. His eyes move from her face to the 4 men flanking her, dark suits, earpieces, and then to the man behind her. Tall, white-haired, with the bearing of someone who has never been spoken to in any tone other than respect. Adebio Keita, the founder of the largest sovereign wealth fund on the African continent, the man whose signature could save every company Han Myungjun owns or erase it from the Seoul Stock Exchange by morning. You, Han breathes, it is not a sentence. It is the sound of a man trying to force a puzzle piece into a hole it cannot fit. I did not catch that, Amara says. Her voice carries. It was trained in negotiation rooms across 3 continents. 3 hours ago, you had quite a lot to say about me. I think the word you used was embarrassment. You asked if I had ever seen so much money in one room. She tilts her head just slightly. I have not, actually. This is a very nice party, but my father's dining room is larger. A woman near the back gasps. A journalist who had been covering the gala for a business magazine starts recording on her phone. Amara does not stop her. She wants this recorded. She wants every shareholder in this room, every journalist, every rival who came to watch Han Myungjun display his power, to witness exactly what power looks like when it changes hands. Han's recovery attempt is clumsy. He steps forward, hand extended, the boardroom reflex activating before his brain can catch up. Miss Keita, I did not realize, if I had known your identity, you would have treated me with basic human decency because of who my father is, not because I am a human being. She does not take his hand. That is not the defense you think it is, Mr. Han. A board member rises from his seat. Shin Dong-chul, the eldest on the board, the one who has been quietly meeting with jinxing representatives for weeks. He smooths his jacket and smiles the smile of a man who has just realized that Han Myungjun's collapse is arriving ahead of schedule. Miss Keita, on behalf of the board, I apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding. I'm sure we can discuss this privately and reach a mutually beneficial. Be quiet, Mr. Shin. Amara does not look at him. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to listen. Shin opens his mouth. Adebio Keita takes one step forward and stops. He does not need to speak. His presence alone communicates a fact that Shin Dongchul, for all his schemes, understands in his bones. There is no corridor of power in this building that leads anywhere he cannot follow. Amara turns back to Han. Her face is composed, but there is something underneath it, something sharp and very old, the kind of anger that does not burn hot because it has been refined into something far more precise. I spent 6 weeks inside your company, Mr. Han, not in your boardrooms, not in your investor lunches. I cleaned your floors, I emptied your waste baskets, I polished your brass until my hands blistered. And in those 6 weeks, I learned things about Hansung Group that your own internal audits have missed for years. I learned which executives take bribes on their lunch breaks. I learned which division heads cook their books to hide losses. I learned that your security protocols are so porous that a woman with a mop could walk into your server room unescorted, which I did twice. But I also learned something I did not expect. She takes a step closer to him, 3 inches, the distance of a challenge. I learned about the man who told the jinxing vultures that he would burn his company to the foundation before he let them touch it. The man who called his employees the people who spent their lives building this. The man who thanked a cleaner for refilling his coffee at 2 in the morning. That man I almost respected. And then tonight, that man walked up to a woman in a gray uniform and tore her apart to feel powerful because he was losing everything and he did not know where else to aim his fear. You made me stand in the center of this room while you asked if I had ever seen so much money. The answer to your question is yes. I manage more money before breakfast than this company is worth, and you just cost yourself $4.8 billion of it. Han's face is gray, the kind of gray that comes from watching the floor drop out of a life you spent 20 years building. His board members are staring at him with expressions ranging from open fury to calculated silence. The journalists are typing. The rival executives are smiling, and Amara Keita is standing in the center of all of it, still not finished. But then something shifts. A man near the back stands up. He is not a board member, he is not a journalist. He is one of the jinxing operatives who has been circling Hansung for months, and he is holding up his phone with an expression of almost theatrical satisfaction. Miss Keita, he says loudly, I have been on a call with my chairman. He has just confirmed that the video of tonight's events has reached our legal team. The board of Hansung Group now has grounds to invoke the moral turpitude clause in Mr. Han's employment contract. Effective immediately, he can be removed as CEO by emergency vote, and we now hold enough proxy votes to make that vote happen tonight. The room erupts, board members are shouting, Shin Dongchul is already pulling out his phone. The journalists are running for better angles. Han Myungjun is standing in the wreckage of his own gala, his own company, his own life, and he cannot look away from Amara Keita's face because she is not smiling. She is not celebrating. She is watching him with an expression that is no longer cold. It is measuring, as if she is waiting to see what he will do next. The deal is not dead, she says quietly, so that only Han and the microphone in the journalist's phone can catch it. Not yet, but I have 3 questions for you, Mr. Han. You will answer them truthfully in front of everyone in this room. If your answers are honest, if they tell me that the man who spoke to jinxing in the parking garage is the real one, and the man who humiliated a cleaner is a temporary lapse of character, then my father and I will sit down with you and discuss the future of Hansung Group. If your answers are lies, or if you try to protect yourself instead of telling the truth, I will walk out of this room and the Keita Fund will never look at your company again. Do you understand these terms? Han Myungjun stares at her. His hands are shaking. He has not slept properly in 2 weeks. He has been fighting a war on 7 fronts. And now, a woman he mocked in front of the world is offering him the only rope he will ever get if he is willing to be honest with her in front of 500 people who want to watch him drown. He says a single word, yes. First question, Amara's voice is clear. 3 hours ago, when you called me to the center of this room and made me the entertainment for your guests, what was the real reason? Not the excuse, not the performance. The real thing underneath all of it. What were you actually doing? Han closes his eyes. When he opens them, something in his face has broken open in a way it has never been allowed to break in public. I was terrified, he says. I was watching Jinxing eat my company bite by bite. I was watching my own board line up to replace me. I had nothing left I could control. And I saw you and you were powerless, and I thought, if I can feel powerful over someone, just for 1 minute, I can breathe. That is the honest answer. It is the ugliest answer I have ever given. But it is the truth. The room goes very quiet. Even the Jinxing operative stops typing. Second question, Amara's voice does not waver. Who told you to humiliate me? Han blinks. No one, I told you it was my own. No, she cuts him off. When I left the service corridor at 7:15, my shift was over. My supervisor, a woman named Mrs. O, told me there had been a spill in the service corridor and I needed to stay to clean it. But there was no spill. I checked. Mrs. O was paid to keep me in the building. Who paid her? Han's face changes. Something dark moves behind his eyes. He turns slowly to look at his board. His gaze lands on Shin Dongchul, who has stopped smiling. The same person, Han says very quietly, who has been leaking my schedule to Jinxing for 6 months. The same person who knew the Cater Fund, was conducting due diligence, and who wanted to drive away the last potential investor before the quarter closed. Shin, it was you. Shin Dongchul's mouth is opening and closing. He tries to say something, but none of the words come out, because Han Myungjun has just said them all, and the room is catching up to what that means. Third question, Amara's voice is softer now, but it carries more weight. If I had been exactly who you thought I was, the cleaner with the misspelled badge and the calluses on her hands, what would you have done differently tonight? Han Myungjun looks at her, he looks at his board, he looks at the Jinxing operative, who is no longer smiling. He looks at the journalists, the shareholders, the staff who have been serving canapes all night and watching their boss treat another worker like garbage. He looks at all of it, and then he looks back at Amara Cater, and he says the only thing he knows she will accept. Nothing, I would have done nothing differently, because I would not have known she was worth anything. The words are heavy and slow, and that is the whole problem. The silence in the ballroom is absolute. Amara Cater holds Han Myungjun's gaze for 5 seconds that feel like 5 years. Then she nods once. Sit down, Mr. Han. We have a deal to discuss. But before Han can move, before the first breath of relief can enter the room, the ballroom doors burst open a second time. A young man in a black suit rushes to Shin Dongchul's side, a document folder in his trembling hands. Shin takes it, opens it, and the smile that spreads across his face is the smile of a man who has been waiting years for a single moment and has finally received it. The accelerated proxy vote, he announces, loud enough for the entire room to hear. The board has voted. Han Myungjun is removed as CEO, effective immediately, and Jinxing Holdings now controls 52% of Hansung Group. The takeover is complete. The company is no longer yours, and there is nothing you or your new investor can do about it. The room tips into chaos. Han Myungjun is motionless, staring at the document that just erased him from his own company. Amara Cater turns to her father. Adebio Cater, who has been silent this entire time, looks at the paper in Shin Dongchul's hand. Then he looks at his daughter, and for the first time all night, the faintest shadow of a smile touches the corner of his mouth, because he knows something Shin Dongchul does not, something none of them know yet. The Cater Fund did not come to this gala to invest in Hansung Group. It came to dismantle the company that tried to humiliate Adebio Cater's daughter, and the real game has only just begun. Adebio Cater did not build the largest sovereign wealth fund on the African continent from a single trading desk in Lagos by walking into rooms without knowing exactly what was on the other side of every door. He had known about Shin Dongchul before his plane touched down in Seoul. He had known about the accelerated proxy vote clause buried in Han Myungjun's employment contract, the one Shin had quietly inserted during a board meeting 2 years ago when everyone was too tired to read the fine print. He had known about the moral turpitude trigger, the exact number of proxy shares Jinxing needed to cross the 51% threshold, and the fact that Shin had been leaking Hansung's internal valuation data to Shanghai for 11 months. He had known all of it. And he had let it happen. Because sometimes you have to let your enemy think they have already won before you show them the cage they have been building around themselves the entire time. Shin Dongchul is still holding the document aloft like a trophy. His smile is wide enough to split his face. The jinxing operative near the back is already typing a press release. The journalists are capturing every angle. Han Myungjun is standing in the center of his own ruined gala, stripped of his title, his company, his legacy, while his own board members turn their backs to him one by one like a diplomatic corps abandoning a doomed embassy. And then Adebio Keita clears his throat. It is not a loud sound. It is the sound of a man who has never needed to raise his voice because the world has always leaned in to hear him. The room leans in now. Mr. Shin, he says, his English is precise, accented in a way that makes every syllable feel like a verdict. The document you are holding, may I see it? Shin hesitates. He has no reason to refuse, and yet something in Adebio's tone makes his smile twitch at the corner. He walks across the ballroom floor, heels clicking, and hands over the paper with the elaborate courtesy of a man who believes he is being gracious to the defeated. Adebio Keita puts on a pair of reading glasses. He examines the document for approximately 8 seconds. Then he looks up and removes the glasses very slowly, the way a surgeon removes gloves after realizing the surgery is far simpler than expected. This transfer of voting shares, he says, the 52% you claim jinxing now controls. You are referring to the block of distressed debt that jinxing purchased over the past 9 months, converted to equity, yes. That is correct, Shin says, still smiling. And that distressed debt, Adebio continues, his voice perfectly conversational, was issued by a consortium of 7 Asian banks, repackaged through a special purpose vehicle registered in the Cayman Islands, and sold to jinxing through a series of intermediaries designed to avoid regulatory scrutiny. Correct. Shin's smile freezes at the edges. The specificity is wrong. This is not the vocabulary of a man hearing bad news. It is the vocabulary of a man reciting facts he already owns. Correct, Shin says, slower this time. Good, Adebio Keita folds the document in half, then in quarters. He places it in the inside pocket of his jacket as if it belongs to him. Then you will be interested to learn that the Keita Fund purchased every single one of those debt instruments 6 months ago, before jinxing ever touched them, before the SPV was even finalized. We were the shadow counterparty in every transaction. The debt you converted into equity, it was our debt, the shares you have been voting as your own. They are our shares. In fact, Mr. Shin, Jinxing Holdings does not control 52% of Hansung Group. Jinxing does not control any of it. The Keita Fund controls 52%, and the Keita Fund has just returned those voting rights to their original registered holder, Han Myungjun. The ballroom does not go silent this time. It erupts. The Jinxing operative drops his phone. It hits the marble, and the screen cracks across the Jinxing logo. Shin Dongchul's face collapses through 7 stages of disbelief, landing on a pale horror that is only possible in a man who just realized he betrayed the wrong people. The journalists are shouting questions. The board members who turned their backs 2 minutes ago are swiveling like weathercocks in a hurricane. And Han Myungjun is staring at Adebio Keita, as if the older man just reached back through time and rewired the universe. But Adebio Keita is not finished. He never is. Mr. Han did not know about our position, he continues, now addressing the journalists directly. He could not have known. The trap was not for him. It was for the people circling him. Jinxing believed they were buying weakness. They were buying our patience. And we let them, because one of the first lessons my daughter learned at my knee is that you do not simply defeat a predator. You remove its ability to hunt altogether. He nods toward the Jinxing operative. Tell your chairman that the Keita Fund will be calling in the full value of the bridge loans Jinxing used to finance this attempted takeover. All $3.2 billion, due in 30 days. If he cannot pay, we will assume control of Jinxing's parent entity, and we will dismantle it the way they tried to dismantle Hansung, piece by piece, patent by patent. I suspect your chairman will find that less enjoyable than he imagined. The operative's face is a study in professional composure, collapsing in real time. He turns and walks out of the ballroom, but his exit is not dignified. It is the exit of a man carrying a message that will destroy his employer before breakfast. Shin Dongchul is still standing in the center of the room. His hands are shaking. The document he was so proud of is now inside a Debyo Keita's jacket, and Shin has nothing. Not a seat on the board, which has just realized he attempted to deliver the company to a foreign predator. Not his reputation, which is being immolated in real time on 6 different business news feeds. Not even his own freedom, because Amara Keita is now walking toward him with a tablet in her hand. "You asked earlier if we could discuss this privately, Mr. Shin," she says. "I have been looking forward to this conversation for 6 weeks." She hands the tablet to a journalist, a woman from the Korea Economic Daily, who reads the screen with widening eyes. On it is a forensic record of every communication Shin Dongchul had with Jinxing Holdings. Encrypted messages he thought were deleted, bank transfers he thought were hidden. A video recording of him accepting a cash envelope in a parking garage 3 blocks from this building, the same garage where Han Myung-jun told the Jinxing emissaries he would burn his company down before letting them take it. Amara had been in that garage. She had been recording from behind a pillar, not the Jinxing men, but Shin, who had arrived to collect his payment 40 minutes later. "You sold your company for 200 million won and a board seat at a shell corporation in Shanghai," Amara says, loud enough for the room to hear. "That is what you valued your seat on the board of a company that employs 14,000 people, 200 million won, in cash, in a parking garage. You are not a businessman, Mr. Shin, you are a thief who wore a suit." The Financial Crimes Unit of the Seoul Metropolitan Police has been waiting in the lobby for the past 20 minutes. Amara called them before she ever walked into the ballroom. Shin Dongchul is escorted out through a service exit, past the potted palm where Amara hid 6 hours ago, past the cart she pushed for 6 weeks, past everything he thought he controlled. His face is wet. No one speaks to him. No one will ever speak to him in this building again. Han Myung-jun has not moved. He is still standing where he stood when Shin read the document, when Debyo Keita dismantled the takeover, when Amara produced the evidence. He is the CEO again, technically. The board has scrambled to reverse its vote with the desperate speed of people who realize they almost followed a traitor off a cliff. But he does not look like a man who has been saved. He looks like a man who has been dismantled just as thoroughly as his enemies, only without handcuffs. Amara walks back across the ballroom floor, the emerald gown sweeping the same marble she polished on her hands and knees for weeks. She stops in front of Han Myung-jun, and she does not speak. She waits. "You saved my company," he says. His voice is raw. "Why, after what I did to you, after everything, why would you save me?" "I did not save you," Amara says. "I saved the 14,000 people who work in this building, none of whom deserve to lose their jobs because their CEO was a coward and their board was corrupt. I saved the patents your engineers spent their lives building. I saved the manufacturing lines, the supply chains, the families that depend on Hansung's survival. You were never the point, Mr. Han. You were a variable. A variable I almost recommended against until I saw you in the parking garage. And even then, tonight, you nearly undid everything." She pauses. The room is silent again, but it is a different silence. The silence of 500 people watching a reckoning. The deal is still alive. $4.8 billion, the merger with the biotech firm, the capital infusion that will stabilize Hansung and make Jinxing a footnote. "My father and I will sit down with you and negotiate, but there is a condition now that was not on the table before tonight." Han meets her eyes. "Name it." "You will not be CEO of Hansung Group when that deal closes. You will not be chairman or vice chairman or any executive officer who answers only to himself. You will be an advisor to the board, with no hiring authority, no firing authority, and no control over corporate strategy. The company will be run by a new CEO chosen by an independent committee that includes representatives from your workforce. You built an empire that treated its cleaners like furniture and its executives like royalty. That ends now. You can keep your shares, you can keep your legacy, but you will never again have the power to humiliate someone because you are afraid and they are convenient." The room absorbs this. The journalists are still recording. The board members are exchanging glances, trying to calculate whether they can survive this new reality. And Han Myung-jun, who 3 hours ago could not imagine a world in which he was not the master of everything he surveyed, is staring at the woman he called an embarrassment, and he is nodding. "I accept," he says, "not because I want to, because I have no right to refuse, and because you are asking me to do the thing I should have done years ago." He pauses. "The cleaner, the real cleaner whose uniform you borrowed, is she. Her name is Choi Min-jae," Amara says. "She is a single mother with a daughter in middle school. She works 16-hour shifts and has never once been thanked by anyone in management. She will be the first employee representative on your new oversight committee, and her salary will double effective tomorrow because my father's fund is covering the difference until the board comes to its senses." A small noise near the service door. A woman in a grey uniform, identical to the one Amara wore, is standing with her hand over her mouth. She has been watching from the corridor, too afraid to enter. Choi Min-jae, the real woman who should have been polishing floors tonight. The woman whose uniform Amara used to go undercover. She is crying silently, the way people cry when something has been taken from them for so long that they stopped believing it could ever be returned. Amara walks to her, not the dramatic walk of a revenge fantasy, but something quieter, something truer. She takes the woman's hands, calloused from years of polishing the same floors Amara only pretended to clean. "Thank you for letting me stand where you stand," Amara says. "I am sorry it took this long." Choi Min-jae cannot speak. She nods, and the nod contains everything. Adebio Keita, who has been watching his daughter with an expression that is not pride because pride is too small a word, finally stands. He walks to the head of the room, to the table where Han Myung-jun was supposed to be celebrating his company's survival. He picks up the champagne bottle that Han abandoned when the first glass dropped. He examines the label, sets it down, and turns to face the room. "My daughter has said what needed to be said. I will add only this. The Keita Fund invests in character, not quarterly returns, not market projections. Character. The characters in this room tonight have been tested. Some have failed, some have surprised themselves, and some have proven that failure can be the beginning of something better if you are willing to accept the cost of what you did. Tonight, the cost is high. Tomorrow, the work begins. And if there is any man in this room who thinks he can avoid that work by waiting for me to leave the country, I would remind him that my daughter now holds a permanent seat on the Hansung Group board. She will be watching." He looks at Han, as will I. Han Myung-jun, who has not slept in 2 weeks, who has been stripped of his power and given back his company in the space of an hour, who has seen his enemies led out in handcuffs and his own sins exposed to the world, does the last thing anyone in that ballroom expects. He walks to the woman in the grey uniform. Choi Min-jae flinches. Then he bows 90 degrees, the deep formal bow reserved for the most profound apologies in Korean culture. He holds it for 5 seconds, 10. The room watches in complete silence. "I am sorry," he says, "not to Miss Keita, to you, to the woman who actually did the work I refuse to see. I am sorry, and I will spend the rest of my career proving it." When he straightens, Choi Min-jae is crying harder, but she is also standing taller, and her chin is lifted in a way it has not been lifted in years. The ballroom begins to empty. The journalists rush to file their stories. The board members scramble to manage their own exposure. The catering staff begin clearing the abandoned champagne glasses like archaeologists cataloging the debris of a civilization that collapsed in a single evening. But Amara Keita remains in the center of the floor, watching the chaos settle around her like dust after an explosion. She has done what she came to do. She has reclaimed her dignity, saved 14,000 jobs, and reshaped the power structure of one of Korea's oldest conglomerates. But as the last of the guests trickle out and the chandeliers dim, a single figure approaches her from the shadows near the service entrance. It is Han Myung-jun. He does not bow. He does not speak immediately. He simply stands there, a man who has been broken open in public and is now trying to understand what is left inside him. "You said I answered your 3 questions honestly," he says. "You said if I did, we would discuss the future. But I have one question for you now, and I need you to answer it honestly. Amara looks at him, the man who humiliated her, the man who thanked her for coffee in the dark, the man who burned his company down to save it and is now standing in the ashes. Ask, she says, did you ever, in all those weeks, in all those late nights when you refilled my coffee and I did not look up, did you ever see something in me that was worth what you did tonight? Not as an investor, as a person, did you ever see something real? The silence that follows this question is different from all the silences that have come before. It is the silence of two people standing on opposite sides of a line that neither of them fully understands, with the weight of everything that has happened pressing down on the space between them. And Amara Keita, who has been precise and controlled and perfectly unreadable for the entire night, hesitates. For the first time, her face is unguarded. And the answer she gives will change both of their lives in ways neither of them expected. Amara Keita stands in the emptying ballroom and looks at the man who humiliated her. The chandeliers are dimming. The last journalists have filed out. The catering staff move like ghosts at the edges of the room, clearing the debris of a night that will be taught in business schools for decades. And Han Myung-jun has just asked her the only question that matters. Did she ever see something real in him? She does not answer immediately, because the truth is more complicated than yes or no, and she has spent 6 weeks learning that Han Myung-jun is more complicated than any balance sheet could capture. The first time I saw you, she says, was on my 3rd day. You were in the elevator. You did not notice me. You were staring at the floor numbers like they were a countdown to something you could not stop. I thought, there is a man who is losing everything and does not know how to ask for help. I have seen that man before. I have been that man before, and I was curious. She takes a step closer. The emerald gown catches the fading light. The second time was in the parking garage. Jinxing offered you a way out, a golden parachute, $1 billion to surrender, and you said no. You said you would burn the company down before you let them touch what your employees built. I was behind a pillar. You did not see me, but I saw you, and I thought, there is something in this man that is worth saving, even if he does not know it yet. Han's face is unreadable. He is listening with the same intensity he once gave to hostile takeover bids, but this is different. This is not a negotiation. This is the delivery of a verdict he has been waiting weeks to hear without knowing he was waiting. The third time, Amara continues, was 2 in the morning. I came to clean your office and you were still awake. You asked me why I worked so hard for something that might not exist in a month. You looked at me, not through me. You saw a person, not a cleaner, not a function, a person. You thanked me for the coffee. You left a note on my cart. And in that moment, I knew that the man who screamed at his logistics director and the man who thanked a stranger for coffee were the same man, broken in some places, whole in others, capable of cruelty, capable of kindness, a human being, not a villain and not a hero, just someone who had forgotten which parts of himself were real. She stops, her voice drops so that only he can hear it. So yes, Han Myung-jun, I saw something real. I saw someone who still knew how to be grateful in the middle of a war. I saw someone who would rather burn everything down than betray the people who trusted him. And I saw someone who, tonight, in front of 500 people, admitted that he humiliated a stranger because he was afraid. That kind of honesty is not nothing. It is the beginning of something, but it is only the beginning. He exhales. It is the exhale of a man who has been holding his breath for years. I do not know how to be anything other than what I was, he says. CEO, chairman, the name on the door. I have been that man since I was 25 years old. If I am not that man, I do not know who I am. Then you learn, Amara says, the way everyone learns, one day at a time. The negotiation begins at 9 o'clock the next morning, in a conference room on the 46th floor that has been scrubbed of every trace of the gala. The Keita legal team has flown in overnight from Lagos, London, and Singapore. The Hansung board has been reconstituted, with Shin Dongchul's allies removed by emergency vote and replaced by interim members selected from the company's senior management. Choi Min-jae sits at the table in a new blouse, pinned with an employee representative badge that did not exist 24 hours ago. She does not speak much, but when she does, everyone listens. Deal takes 4 days to finalize. $4.8 billion in exchange for a 40% stake in the merged entity, with governance provisions that would have been unthinkable in any Korean keyboard a decade ago. Worker representation on the board, an independent ethics committee with the power to investigate executive conduct, a mandatory annual review of labor practices across every subsidiary. The Cater Fund did not just invest money, it invested a new way of running a company. Han Myung-jun attends every session. He sits at the end of the table, not at the head. He answers questions when asked. He does not interrupt. He does not command. He is learning. Amara realizes what it means to be a person instead of a position. The process is painful to watch, in the way that watching someone learn to walk again after an accident is painful, but he does not stop. He does not retreat. He shows up every morning in a suit that is slightly less expensive than the ones he used to wear, as if he is trying to shed the armor without quite knowing what will be left underneath. On the third day, during a break in the negotiations, he finds Amara on the observation deck. She is looking out over Seoul, the city spreading in every direction like a circuit board, millions of lives blinking in the afternoon haze. "I have been thinking about what you said," he tells her, "about learning who I am without the title. And I think I have been that man for so long that I forgot there was ever anyone else underneath. When I was 25, my father died. The board wanted to replace him with an outside executive. I fought them for 2 years to keep the company in the family. By the time I won, I had become someone who could not lose, not ever, not about anything, because if I lost, I would lose the company. And if I lost the company, my father's death would mean nothing." He pauses. The city hums below them. "Last night after the gala, I went to the parking garage, the one where you recorded Shin. I stood in the same spot where I told the jinxing men I would burn everything down, and I realized that I meant it. I would have burned Hansung to the foundation rather than surrender, but I never once thought about the people who would burn with it. The 14,000 employees, their families, their mortgages, their children. I was so focused on winning that I forgot what winning was for." Amara does not fill the silence. She has learned, from years of watching her father negotiate, that the most important things people say often come after the pause. "I do not know if I can be a different kind of man," Han says finally, "but I want to try, not for the company, not for the deal, for myself, because you were right. The woman I humiliated was not a variable. She was a human being, and so was the woman who actually did the cleaning, and so were the thousands of other people I never saw because I was too busy being the name on the door." He turns to face her. The afternoon light catches his face, and for the first time since she met him, he looks like a man who is not performing. "You asked me 3 questions last night. I answered them honestly, but I have one more thing to say, and it is not an answer to a question you asked. It is something I need you to know." Amara waits. "When you walked into that ballroom in your uniform, before I said a single word to you, I saw your face. And for 1 second, before I remembered that I was the CEO and you were the cleaner and everyone was watching, I saw you, just you, not your uniform, not your station, you, and I thought, there is something in that woman, something steady, something I recognized. And then I buried it because I was afraid of what it meant. I was afraid of being seen by someone who was not impressed by me, so I did what I always did. I attacked first. I made you small so I could feel large, and I have been ashamed of that moment since the second it left my mouth." He takes a breath. "That is the truth, not the strategic truth, not the boardroom truth, the truth I will carry for the rest of my life, and I wanted you to know it before the deal closes, because after today, we will be colleagues, and I will never say it again." Amara looks at him for a long moment. The man who tied a child's shoes in the original story she once heard, a story that is not hers but echoes in this moment anyway. The man who asked if she would be there tomorrow. The man who has been broken open and is standing in the wreckage, waiting to see if anyone will help him pick up the pieces. "There is a position on the new oversight committee," she says. "It is unpaid. It has no authority. It is essentially a public commitment to being held accountable by people who have no reason to trust you. If you want to be a different kind of man, start there. Let the people you used to overlook be the ones who decide whether you are changing or just performing. If you can do that, if you can submit to that, then the answer to your question is yes. I saw something real. And I think it might still be there." The deal closes on a Friday. The signing ceremony is small, nothing like the gala. No crystal chandeliers, no champagne towers, no 500 guests in formal dress. Just a conference room, a stack of documents, and the people who will be responsible for building what comes next. Han Myung-jun signs his name on the last page. He is not signing as CEO. He is signing as an advisor to the board, a position with no executive authority and no direct reports. When he sets down the pen, his hand is steady. Adebio Keita watches from across the table. When the last signature is dry, he stands and offers his hand to Han. "You have done something difficult," Adebio says. "Not the deal, the other thing, the thing my daughter asked of you. Most men in your position would have fought to keep their title. You surrendered it. That takes a kind of courage that is not taught in business school." "It was not courage," Han says. "It was the first honest decision I have made in 10 years. That is not the same thing." "It is the beginning of the same thing," Adebio replies. "Come to Lagos in the spring. I want you to see how we run things, and I want my board to meet the man who gave up his company to save it." The handshake holds. Then Adebio Keita does something unexpected. He pulls Han into a brief embrace, the kind of gesture that does not exist in Korean business culture, the kind of gesture that comes from a place beyond culture entirely. "You have a daughter," Adebio says quietly. "I know about her. She lives with her mother in Busan. You have not seen her in 2 years. That is the next thing you need to fix. The company is not your legacy, Han Myung-jun. She is. Do not learn that too late." Han's face loses its composure for exactly 2 seconds. Then he nods, and the nod contains everything. 6 months later, Amara Keita returns to Seoul for the first quarterly review of the merged entity. The Hansung campus has changed. There is a daycare center on the 2nd floor, bright and full of children whose parents used to worry about what to do with them during school breaks. There is an employee council that meets every Tuesday, and Choi Min-jae is its chairwoman. She no longer wears a gray uniform. She wears a blazer that she bought with her doubled salary, and she carries a tablet that contains the grievances and suggestions of every worker in the company. When she speaks in board meetings, the executives listen, not because they have to, because she has earned it. Han Myung-jun works from a small office on the 4th floor. It is not the corner office. It does not have a view of the city. It has a view of the daycare center, which he requested specifically. He spends his days advising the new CEO on long-term strategy and his evenings in Busan, where a 12-year-old girl is slowly, tentatively, learning to trust the father who disappeared into his own ambition when she was 10. He does not know if she will ever fully forgive him. He does not ask her to. He simply shows up every weekend with a gift that he chose himself, not something an assistant purchased. Last month it was a pair of pink sneakers with lights in the soles. She wore them when he took her to the aquarium, and she held his hand for the first time in 2 years while they watched the fish. Amara finds him on the observation deck, the same one where he told her he wanted to try. It is winter now. The city is dusted with snow. "You look different," she says. "I sleep now," he replies, "most nights." "That was not what I meant." He turns to face her. She is wearing a dark coat over a business suit, her hair shorter than it was at the gala, her expression still unreadable in the way that used to terrify his board. "I know what you meant," he says. "The answer is yes. I am different, not finished, not fixed, but different. I no longer need to be the most powerful person in the room. I no longer need to win every argument. I no longer need to be right all the time. It turns out that none of those things were the same as being happy." "And are you happy?" He considers this. Below them, a group of children runs across the courtyard, their laughter muffled by the glass. "I am learning," he says, "the way you said, one day at a time." A silence settles between them. It is not the silence of the gala, charged with power and humiliation and the wreckage of a man's life. It is something softer, something that might, in another timeline, in another story, have been the beginning of something else entirely. But this is not that story. This is the story of a woman who walked into a room full of people who thought they knew exactly what she was worth and proved that they had never known anything at all. "There is something I never told you," Amara says. about why my father agreed to let me go undercover. It was not just due diligence. It was not just corporate strategy. 5 years ago, I was betrayed by someone I trusted, a business partner. She took everything we built together, and I had to start over with nothing. For a long time, I thought the lesson was that I had been too trusting, that I needed to be harder, colder, more suspicious of everyone. But my father told me something I did not understand until tonight. He said, "Do not let the people who hurt you teach you to be someone you are not. Let them teach you to be someone better, and then use that to make sure it never happens to anyone else." She looks at him. "You were the person who hurt me, Han Myung-jun, but you were also the person who let me teach you. Most people never do that. Most people cling to their defenses until they die inside them. You let go. That is not nothing." "I let go because you gave me a reason to," he says. "Not the deal, not the money, you, the way you stood in that ballroom and refused to be small, the way you asked me 3 questions and waited for the truth, the way you saved my company even when you had every right to destroy it. I have been surrounded by powerful people my entire life. I had never met someone who was powerful in the way you are powerful. It changed something in me." He pauses. "I will never be able to repay what you did, but I will spend the rest of my life trying." Amara smiles. It is the first full smile she has given him since the night of the gala, and it transforms her face into something warmer than he has ever seen. "Then start by coming to the employee council meeting tomorrow. Choi Min-jae has a proposal about maternity leave. She is nervous about presenting it to the board. If you are there, if you listen, if you support her in front of everyone, it will mean something. Not to me, to her, to the 14,000 people who still do not quite believe this is real." "I will be there," he says. "I know you will," she replies. And she does know, because Amara Keita has spent her entire life learning to see people clearly, and what she sees now in Han Myung-jun is a man who has stopped performing, a man who has stopped hiding, a man who will never again be the person he was on the night of the gala, not because he cannot, but because he has finally understood that being powerful and being kind are not opposites. They are the same thing, measured in different directions, and that is the thing no one tells you about revenge. The best revenge is not destruction. The best revenge is building something so much better that the person who hurt you has to choose between changing and being left behind. Han Myung-jun chose to change, and that choice, more than any deal or any document or any dramatic reveal, is what will echo through this company for generations. The snow continues to fall over Seoul, soft and quiet and relentless, the way change always falls when no one is watching. And in the observation deck of Hansung Tower, a woman who was once invisible and a man who was once invincible stand side by side, looking out at a city that neither of them fully understands, building something neither of them could have built alone. It is not a fairy tale. It is not a romance. It is something rarer. It is the truth, hard-won and still unfolding, the way all real things are. Amara Keita did not get revenge in the way most people imagine it. She did not scream or threaten or file a lawsuit. She walked back into that ballroom in an emerald gown and asked 3 questions that forced a powerful man to look directly at the ugliest thing he had ever done. And then, when he answered honestly, she did something far more radical than destroy him. She gave him a path to become someone else. That path is not complete. Han Myung-jun still wakes up some mornings and reaches for the authority he surrendered. He still catches himself wanting to command a room instead of listening to it. But he also sits in employee council meetings and takes notes while Choi Min-jae presents her proposals. He shows up in Busan every weekend with sneakers he picked out himself. He is, as Amara said, learning, one day at a time. And Choi Min-jae, the woman whose uniform Amara borrowed, now runs a department that did not exist before the gala. She trains new employee representatives from subsidiaries across the country. Last month, she gave a speech at a labor conference in Tokyo. She spoke about the night a stranger walked into a ballroom wearing her name badge and changed everything. She cried through most of it, so did half the audience. The ripple effects have moved far beyond Hansung Tower. 3 other keyballs have announced worker representation initiatives in the past 6 months. The Korean National Assembly is reviewing legislation that would mandate employee seats on boards of publicly traded companies. A business school in Switzerland has written a case study about the Qatar Fund's investment in Hansung, framing it as a model for ethical shareholder activism. None of this would have happened if Han Myung-jun had simply been replaced by a rival conglomerate. It happened because a woman who could have chosen destruction chose construction instead. But here is the question this story leaves behind. For every Amara Qatar who has the resources and the protection to walk back into the room, how many others never get that chance? How many cleaners, drivers, kitchen staff, and factory workers are humiliated by people with power and money, and then sent away with no emerald gown to change into, no father with a sovereign fund to back them up, no journalists recording the moment of reckoning? The answer is millions. Every day, in every city, the machinery of inequality runs on small cruelties that never make the headlines. The only difference between this story and those stories is that this one had a witness who could do something about it. If this story moved you, if you have ever been made to feel small by someone who mistook their position for their worth, then take one thing from Amara Qatar's example. You do not need $4.8 billion to see another person clearly. You do not need a sovereign fund to ask an honest question. You do not need an emerald gown to refuse to be invisible. The power to look past a uniform and see a human being is free. It is available to all of us in every moment with every person we encounter. The question is whether we use it. Thank you for watching this story through to the end. It was made with the belief that even the most ordinary moments can contain the seeds of extraordinary change if someone is paying attention. If you have a word of encouragement for the real Choi Min-jis of the world, or if this story reminded you of someone, drop it in the comments below. We read everything. And if someone in your life needs to hear that it is possible to walk back into the room, share this with them. Please like, subscribe, and help us grow this family. One love, and we will see you in the next.